Hey everyone, so we're so glad to be back with you today. We're going to talk about perfectionism. It's a theme that we end up in conversations frequently about, and so it's something that we wanted to address really early on in our podcasting. We're hoping that all of you have come, who in the future from now have come back to this episode, and those of you that are on this journey with us real time, that you'll keep this in mind as you listen to all of our episodes with our amazing guests and people who've overcome so much. And just remember what we're going to talk to you about today. So we wanted to first bring to you the definition of perfection.
So you can think of perfection as flawlessness, having unsurpassed excellency, right? Having absolutely no defect whatsoever.
So people are humans. People are not perfect. And what we want to talk about today is just the fact that as we talk about these wonderful systems and you hear from our wonderful guests, no one is suggesting that you reach for perfection. In fact, we actually really recommend the opposite. So we wanted to tell you a little bit about our time when we were in the military. Steve and I would move most of our career for every 23 months. It was pretty often.
That's right. So we moved every 2 years basically, and not just a little ways. It was usually from one coast to the other or overseas, and then a couple years later come back, being deployed while we were in those different countries or in those different states and that type of stuff. So we were always on the move. We lived out of boxes for so many years, it felt.
Yeah. And in those times, we were also having our family. So Steve would be deployed and I would be home, dealing with kids who we were beginning to discover that they had special needs, or, we barely had been out of boxes and he's already out of town across the country or across the globe. And sometimes the boxes were still stacked to the ceiling. A lot of the time, I felt like our house looked like a wreck. And if I went online and looked at Pinterest or Facebook or these days there's even Instagram, it could really whop me over the head and just make me feel like a failure, make me feel like I was somehow missing the mark. And that is something that I don't think many of us families even realize is happening to us. It's this subliminal idea that if we aren't doing what our neighbors are doing, or we don't have the same kind of house that our favorite Pinterest pins have, or the recipes we make don't look as beautiful, that somehow we're less than. And what Steve and I really have come to believe over so many years of juggling and of having to really prioritize and in some ways triage in our life is that there really isn't such a thing as perfection inside of a family. Really, it's a matter of choosing what is best for our unique family, for the unique humans that make up our family unit, not what others outside of our home who don't know our unique selves, our unique children, our unique spouses that might propose to us as an idea of perfection. And over time and over all of the, boxes and papers and holidays spent living on air mattresses in homes we hadn't received furniture in yet and that sort of thing, we learned that our home was not a magazine and it wasn't intended to be a magazine. And that is something also that my mother impressed upon me while I was growing up, and I'm so thankful that she did, is that our home is a training ground, that it's a classroom for our children to learn to become whole and to become independent. It's not somewhere that's a model home. It's not somewhere that is supposed to be in a state of magazine-like perfection. In fact, we can celebrate when we see that there is a mess, because that mess is life. That shows life. At one point, I saw a photographer, I wish I could remember who or where, but it was a blog, and this whole blog was a photographer taking pictures of the mess in their home. I don't know if you remember that, Steve.
No, I don't, but
Yeah.
Could win a prize with that.
Yeah, it was really neat because they actually glorified the signs of life in their home that their children left, whether it was dinosaurs dangling off the edge of the stairs in the home or, the superheroes strewn across the family room. It to me really was a good visual for the fact that there is a joy and a richness actually in having our home not be in a magazine state, and that our life not be on a pursuit or in a pursuit of perfection. So for us, we had to redefine what was really quality in our home. Really what was something that we accepted as not perfection, but value and what we wanted in our home. And for us, we decided that love, forgiveness, grace, mercy, leadership, those sorts of qualities are what we feel were real standards that could be chased in a home, not perfection. There's no way inside of a family made up of so many unique, beautiful individuals that there will ever be a flawlessness. We are flawed, and that's part of our beauty. No family is going to look the same as another family either. So we are all going to look very unique, and in that there's a beauty as well, because that is like art. There is no perfection in art. In fact, there's actually a celebration of the uniqueness, and often a celebration of the mistakes that are found within the art. So what's valued there is the care and the thought and the intent that is put into that art. And when we're able to view our families with that same light, suddenly you can see that perfection dims in comparison.
That's right. And if you think about it, striving for perfection would perhaps destroy creativity, because creativity cannot be found by chasing perfection, because perfection would have to have some sort of rules to say, yes, this is it. You have arrived. You have attained perfection. And that would rob you of any ability for creative thought or, it's like a child. And children are born creative. And it is the pursuit of perfection in various areas that really beats the drum so hard that the children lose that creativity as they grow. And as you become adults, you say goodbye to that sort of creativity, right? Because there was the pursuit of perfection. A lot of times what we find is that pursuing perfection isn't so much that you are chasing so strongly after success, but you're fighting so hard to not be seen as having failed, right? If you think about it, you working so very hard to make every little thing perfect might just be that you have a toxic condition of perfectionism, and that you don't want to be seen as having failed in any single tiny little area. That's not success, okay? That's destroyed you of creativity and joy, and it still doesn't land you in the realm of perfection.
Right. It also removes the excitement and the discovery that's just waiting to be found with families and with the new things that your children are learning or that your spouse has just discovered and told you about, and the new opportunities that you might have. If you're so worried that you're going to fail and you won't be willing to take a risk to set out and to make something that is beautiful. You don't want to remove everything that is so unique within the family and within each individual in this fruitless chase of an idea that wasn't even created for you. So we really just want to encourage all of our families that if you can, if we could save you time learning this the hard way, save you the agony of years of us looking at boxes thinking, why can't we keep up? Why are we so tired? Why is it so hard to get this house set up? Why doesn't our house look like our neighbors? We had those moments. We've had those times, and we had to walk through them and sort through them ourselves inside of our heads and inside of our relationship. If we could save you all of that time and all of that agony, we would say, stop looking outside of your home for your ideas of what beauty and perfection are. just start looking inside. Start looking at what is inside of you. What do you love? What gifts were you innately gifted with and given at birth? What brings you joy? What brings your spouse joy? What lights up your kids? Start to spend time building into your family members instead of looking outward with fear over where you might be perceived as failing. And start creating inside of your family unit a culture that is unique only to you. If that means you guys design a logo and you make merchandise for your family just to help you remember, do it. It's really fun. We really recommend it. Whatever it takes to help you guys realize that you are the only family like you. Nobody can top you at being you. If you have a home that is filled with love, filled with forgiveness, filled with humbleness, and filled with joy, to us, that is perfection.
Well said. Okay, so now it's time for a sea story. Now, everyone who's ever been in the Navy or associated with anyone in the Navy has heard about sea stories, and those are, usually embellished a little bit. As folks used to jokingly say, don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So I'm going to tell you stories that actually are true, and that have to do with perfection. So the first one is called Happy to Glad. Now, when I was on my first ship, I had this executive officer. Now, the executive officer is the second in command behind the commanding officer, right? And I was much further down in the chain of command as a brand new ensign, having reported aboard the ship. But the executive officer, he excelled in Happy to Glad. And when we say happy to glad, it sort of conveys that all you're doing is wasting your time trying to change one adjective to another, right? Because in today's lingo, they're usually used interchangeably. So that's the way it was. Now, every so often, I would have to develop a message that was going to be sent from our ship to some other place. And in order for me to do that, the executive officer had to approve it, and then the commanding officer had to make the final approval, and then off the message would go. So I would draft the message, I would give it to the executive officer. He'd call me up an hour or so later, and there's green ink all over it, right? Because that was his signature, right? He used a green pen. He was the only person on the ship allowed to use green ink pens. So green ink all over it, changing this to that and all over the place. And okay, I'd take the message back. I'd go work on it for an hour or whatever. Make the changes exactly as prescribed. Bring it back. He would have it for an hour or so. Call me back up there again. He would have made changes to his changes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm wasting my day this way. And so I'd take it back, and then I would make my edits to his edits and whatnot. And then finally, after an iteration or two, it would say, okay, good enough, he would say. And then I'd take the message and I'd walk it down to the commanding officer and I would give it to him. Now, he was the only one allowed to use blue ink. Everyone else had to use black ink, except for the XO, he used green ink. And so the commanding officer would have it, and he'd have it for an hour or so, and then he'd call me up and I'd look, and for sure, he has changed what the XO wrote in there back to essentially what I had drafted the first time 8 hours earlier. And I would think, oh my gosh, I have spent the day. And that was how and this was, yeah, there you go. Katie's laughing because she knows it's true. She remembers my frustration with this.
Yes.
And I'm sure she's heard her father see stories about the same thing, about how we waste our time changing happy to glad. Well, so that's one sea story. The other one, in a very similar vein, is called Better is the Enemy of Good Enough. Now, I find it ironic that I've heard United States military officers and people saying that time and time and time and time again. And I heard it and I thought it was just some common lingo that military folks used. Well, it turns out that that quote is actually attributed to a Soviet naval officer. In fact, Admiral Sergei Gorshkov, if I pronounce that correct. I hope I do. He was the equivalent of their chief of naval operations for a couple decades, quite a long time. And the premise is this: better is the enemy of good enough. We waste countless hours and dollars trying to take something that would work fine. If left alone, you could spend your time doing something else. But we waste our time and we waste our money chasing perfection, trying to make it better, when good enough is good enough. And that brings me kind of to my third point in this, is that we can define what the requirements are for good enough and say, if our family policy or whatever it might be meets these standards, then that's good enough. What are the requirements? Now, in the military, we build equipment and it has to meet certain requirements and it has to be able to perform to those standards, but it has to be developed on time, meaning there's a schedule, and within a certain budget, meaning there's a cost associated with it that has to be met and not exceeded. Now, imagine this. Imagine that your family inherits a large sum of money and you decide you want to build a home, and it's going to be a beautiful home and you're going to surprise your spouse with it. Now, I know that's a bit outlandish there. I'm sure you should work together on it. But let's just say you go, you find the plot of land, you hire a builder, an architect, and you begin building the house. And a couple months into it, your spouse just cannot wait to see it, just wants to see it, right? And so you go to tour the home that's under construction together, and the spouse looks and it's like, I can't believe that the chimney, the fireplace, is on the east end of the house. It should be on the west end of the house. Now, it's already built. It's on the east end of the house. But it would be better, it would be perfect if it was on the west end of the house. Now, that's outlandish, but can you imagine the complication, the delays, the incredible cost it would take to dismantle the fireplace in the chimney and move it from the east end of the house and put it at the west end of the house? Okay, striving after perfection is sometimes like that. If the requirement is to have a lovely home with a fireplace, then you've met the requirement and you can meet it on time and within budget. But the strive for perfection to make it just right, you can see how that sort of blows everything out of the water. Well, family requirements are not that outlandish, right? If you boil them down, is there love in your home? Do you love your children? Do your children feel loved? Does your spouse feel loved by you and by the other members of the house? And are needs met? Everyone is well fed, well clothed, and so forth, okay? Those are reasonable family requirements. The pursuit of perfection adds tons and tons of other stuff that won't be remembered, right? At least not laughingly, years down the road. Chasing perfection is not important. Success is great, but success is not equal to perfection. Said differently, perfection does not mean success. You can achieve success in your family without what the world might brand as being perfect. Okay, so knowing your requirements for your family, having your priorities, making sure everyone is loved and well cared for, you have good family relationships, everyone's healthy, these sorts of things. Those are good priorities, those are good requirements. I don't think that you need to shoot for too much beyond that. Okay, anything above that is extra, and if it fits in nicely, so be it. But if it is a strain on your family, on your family's finances, on your health, on your family's relationships, then you're moving in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
So while we were doing a very intensive neurodevelopmental program with our son, who benefited in
Greatly.
amazing ways from this program. And it was an all-in team kind of thing that we chose to do as a family. One of the things that they taught us through our regular trainings, we would go for a week of training and appointments every 6 months. One of the things they highlighted regularly was joyousness. They would say it to us over and over and over because they wanted us to remember that no matter how precise we were with the proper movements, no matter how perfectly we executed the number of repetitions and the exact rotations of all the different exercises that were going to benefit our son and help build his brain connections and help heal him, that none of it would take effect, if especially not as well as it could, but we would risk it all if we did not have joyousness. They emphasized to us after decades and decades of working with families like ours. I mean, they started doing this right after World War II. That without joyousness, building those relationships and the bonds, that much of what we would do would be futile. But that if we added that perfect secret ingredient of joyousness into our daily work, as hard as it was, as many hours as it took, as detail-oriented as it needed to be, that joyousness was a key ingredient. So throughout this podcasting journey, as we interview our most amazing guests who are going to bring to you absolutely hard-won lessons and tools that they can share with you to save you time and to save you effort, we just want you to remember that just pick and choose the ones that you believe fit into your unique family. This is all to help you to achieve that joyousness, to achieve the love, to achieve that peace and abundance in your life. So we don't ever want to convey to you all that we think success is in any form perfection, or that perfection is success. So we hope that you all are having an absolutely amazing week, and we would love to hear from you. So please do come find us on our Facebook page and just spend a little time looking inward to your beautiful family this week.
And today's podcast is a little shorter than normal by 10 minutes or so, but we wanted to get a point across, and we wanted it to be hopefully brief so that it was a little more hard-hitting and impactful, so that you would understand that perfection is a lie. Don't chase it, right? Chase joy, creativity, love in your home. Those are good things. Those are worth pursuing.
That's right. All right, everybody. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye, everyone.